We've all heard the stories, firefighters who have rushed into burning buildings, or soldiers sacrificing themselves for the conservation of peace at home. I'm sure many of us, myself included, have made up our minds that we can never do either of these. Over the course of my research, I studied many of these stories, war stories rotten with death, hardship, and daily struggles. And although they made me quite sad, they helped me to learn more about human nature, how people respond to the worst situations imaginable. Specifically, how does the worst bring out the best in us? To start, I looked at a number of stories of people who hit their rock bottoms and tried to figure out what made them able to persevere. I started my research with the novel All the Light We Cannot See, where Werner, just a young boy, is sent to the front lines of World War II in order to find resistance radio transmitters. Airstrikes place him on the verge of death in the rubble of a hotel basement. However, in this time of need, he was able to find compassion for a French girl through the radio. Upon escaping the basement, Werner neglects his own needs of health in order to save the girl's life. Somehow, in this deadly situation, Werner was able to find empathy for his enemy, an enemy he was taught to hate. But how? Next, I listened to a podcast with Medal of Honor recipient Dakota Meyer. Bad leadership and poor planning put Dakota and his team at the bottom of a valley surrounded by enemies. While Meyer was able to rescue dozens of wounded Afghans, when he finally made it to his men at the bottom of the valley, he was only able to rescue their shredded bodies, not their lives. How was Meyer able to drive into the fire, unprotected in the 50-cal nest, just waiting for a bullet to strike his temple? In Schindler's List, Schindler was faced with the horrid society of the Nazi regime. However, instead of turning a blind eye like so many Germans did, Schindler devoted all of his money and time to the rescuing of Jews. His actions were extremely dangerous to his reputation and his life, as discovery could have resulted in his death. How was Schindler able to risk everything he had, even his life, to rescue the people he had never met? In the show Medal of Honor, I studied the stories of Edward Carter and Joseph Vittori. In the case of Edward Carter, he battled segregation that was ever present in America at the time, and especially in the military. Yet Carter was able to single-handedly defeat a unit of Nazi soldiers, taking a number of injuries and continuing onwards. And Joseph Vittori was able to hold back the Korean forces, manning multiple machine gun nests in order to protect his friends on the other side of the hill. How are these soldiers able to look at the worst-case scenarios imaginable, and yet accomplish some of the most impressive feats? I believe it's the act of losing everything in a perilous situation, and the recognition of this peril that creates immense amounts of bravery, all due to our ingrained fight-or-flight instinct. During fight or flight, the brain releases a series of chemicals in the brain to respond to a dangerous situation as soon as possible. I'm sure many of us have experienced such a response. But in all these cases, none of the men left. Each one chose to fight, and more so to sacrifice themselves for others. So now, after all my research and evaluating, I can say this: situations of peril and danger not only show survival instinct, but additionally, these situations miraculously cause a person to become entirely selfless unto death, performing marvelous deeds for those in need. I don't believe humans to be selfless creatures, but somehow, along with the body's fight-or-flight response, humans also seem to have a response of selflessness, not for honor or reward, but out of compassion and love for those in need. These ideas are not only apparent in war. The firefighter, the humanitarian, and many others undergo a similar response. However, the cases I studied, some of the more obvious examples, happen to be in war. In truth, in dangerous situations, the human body undergoes so many changes in such a brief amount of time. Adrenaline rushing through the body, fight or flight, a survival instinct, and selflessness. And it's ultimately these components that create the best of us in the worst environments.